Yeah, married 28 years. I've been white for 57 years. Really long time. And as the senior saltine in the room, I can say with authority that these neo-Nazis running around in the third decade of the 21st century making it a little weird to be white. Am I right? Yeah. Where are my white people at, Comedy Works? I see two in the back. Shout out so I know you're here. No, don't shout out. That's when it gets really weird, right? Like, as I said, I've been white for a really long time, and now even I get nervous when I look up in a room and see nothing but white faces. I'm like, this better be a meeting of the local pickleball club or a comedy show in Denver. I am in the wrong room. It's always good when the Nazi jokes work. They don't work everywhere, and when they don't, it gets really weird for me in a hurry, you know? Like, I won't say where they don't work Colorado Springs, but sometimes I don't get laughs, you know? It's just a room full of guys that are like, books are bad, vaccines are bad, Nazis, jury's still out. Let's see what they have to say, you know? It's free speech. Let's not rush to judgment.
Republican Party has been getting upset really for the last 10 years about being called Nazis and saying it's unfair to compare Donald Trump to Hitler. If you're interested, The Atlantic predictably has a great article on that whole story. But at some point, just at the end of 2025, paragon of liberalism in Texas, Ted Cruz came out and said, the Republican Party might have a Nazi problem. Specifically, Cruz was talking about the rise of anti-Semitism on the right. He didn't really care about any of the other activity, evidently. But where was he in 2017? Right? We'll talk more about Charlottesville at the end. But it's not entirely clear what the single catalyst was for Cruz's shift, if there was a single catalyst. There are so many options, like Icehead Greg Bovino being filmed dressing like an SS leader, or maybe I think it was the release of the 1,500 or so text messages from a young Republican group that was praising Nazi ideology, right down to the gas chambers. And if you followed that story and you saw the pictures, these quote-unquote young Republicans weren't impressionable high school or college students with minimally formed brains. They were mostly white-collar professionals in their 30s with minimally formed brains. But now I've been doing a joke since I started almost 3 years ago. It's my opener about white supremacists and how these neo-Nazis marching in the streets in the third decade of the 21st century is making it weird to be white. And after the joke and the punchline, I tag it with kind of a Homer Simpson-esque under-the-breath reference to Colorado Springs. It goes something like this. After I get the laugh, I say, it's always good when the Nazi jokes get laughs. I'm not saying where they haven't Colorado Springs, but when they don't, things get weird for me up here in a hurry. And that line, if I do it right, gets huge laughs in places like Denver. And it might just be because of a reputation for racism in the city of Colorado Springs. But where did it get that reputation? And that's what this week's episode of Based on an Almost True Story is about. The book is BlacKKKlansman by Ron Stallworth. The movie is also called BlacKKKlansman, spelled with 3 Ks in the middle. The book is a memoir written by the first black police officer of the Colorado Springs Police Department, the aforementioned Ron Stallworth. The movie is a Spike Lee joint, and it has all the creative flair you would imagine from Spike Lee, who also co-wrote the script in addition to directing. The book is short. It's less than 200 pages, and it doesn't have enough to carry a 2-hour movie. So Spike and his fellow screenwriters added some dramatic storylines, like a love interest for the star and some close calls with undercover agents being added. They were good, but they weren't true. Ron being arrested at the end and beaten up by other cops while Ron was undercover, that didn't happen. There's a particularly interesting twist where his partner is made out to be Jewish, which is a very interesting moment in the film and evolution of that character, but that also was made up. Anyway, if you read the book, there's not an ounce of bitterness that comes through from Stallworth, despite all he had to put up with. He loved being a cop. He worked in other departments outside of Colorado after this story took place, including Wyoming and Utah, and he had a great career. And just researching some follow-up for this episode, it looks like he had another book come out just in the last couple of years about his time in Utah. The Ron Stallworth character is played wonderfully by John David Washington, son of Denzel. He was so good at this. I actually got a list of his other movies to binge this summer. He was also a very talented college and pro football player before becoming an actor. But to the story, what's true, the real tension in the story starts right up front, where Ron is a new police officer on the Colorado Springs Department, and he's reading the paper, and there's an ad in there from the KKK, like to join the Klan. And he calls it, leaves him a message, not expecting anything to come of it. It's almost like he's bored, and it was just kind of interesting. And he uses his real name. He leaves a message, Mrs. Ron Stallworth, right? Well, lo and behold, they call him back and want to meet him, and they're interested in recruiting him into the Ku Klux Klan, the Black Ron Stallworth. So obviously that's a problem. And what they do is they develop an undercover operation where Ron's partner, played by the brilliant Adam Driver, has to stand in and play Ron Stallworth undercover. And he basically, throughout the movie, joins the KKK in Colorado Springs. Now, for the rest of the movie, the entire story, when the KKK calls Ron at the very first phone number he left for them, which is his work phone number, didn't have cell phones because it was late 70s, they were talking to the real Ron Stallworth. And then in person in the meetings, they are talking to his partner, played by Adam Driver, and they never figure it out. To make it more fascinating, in the movie, and it's 100% true, right up until the last scene, there's a storyline about the Grand Wizard of the KKK at the time from Louisiana, David Duke, and a presidential candidate. We'll get into all his politics in a minute. He comes to Colorado Springs for a rally, and he's talking to Ron on the phone multiple times before that, and that's 100% true until the last scene where Ron reveals he's a black man and kind of sticks it to David Duke. That part didn't happen, but it's a good way to wrap up the movie. But there is a true comic thread in the story where David Duke, on the phone to Ron Stallworth, explains to Ron Stallworth how he can tell Ron is white because black people talk different than white people. And Ron's like, oh yeah, tell me about that. And David Duke has a detailed explanation for his trick for picking up that someone on the other end of the line is not white, and has to do with the pronunciation of the word R, A-R-E. It really happened. You have to see the movie, though, to believe it. If you're not familiar with David Duke, he was, again, the Grand Wizard of the Klan in the 70s and up through 1980, when he stepped down, not because he had a change of heart, but because he was getting more into politics. That's how he was going to change the world to the benefit of the white race, by becoming a political leader. And by the way, he's still very alive. He's only 75 years old, which is insane for me to think about, because I remember him in the 80s. I guess I graduated high school in 85 and college in 89. So, he was in the news a lot. When you're running for office, that happens. And you got a lot of airtime and TV interviews. Anyway, so Duke, the former Grand Wizard of KKK, an avowed racist and anti-Semite, he ran for office many times, including a couple presidential bids, U.S. Senate bids, and one bid for the House of Representatives. He was actually elected to the Louisiana House of Representatives in 1989, not 1969, 1989. And I think when he ran for governor of Louisiana, he lost, but he got, not by much, he got a ton of votes. He was a Democrat early in his life, and if you're familiar with the Southern strategy under Nixon and the historical flip of Southern Democrats to the Republican Party, starting with the Civil Rights Act and accelerating through Nixon's term and on through to Reagan, that won't be a total surprise. But that's David Duke. So, but back to the story. So again, there's all this back and forth. They've infiltrated the KKK in Colorado Springs with Ron's partner, and he's picking up tidbits of information, but there isn't anything that big that takes place. In the movie, they had to make up a couple of things, again, for like dramatic effect, trying to bomb the woman who was the student leader of the Black Student Union at Colorado College. She's a real person, but that bombing didn't take place. In fact, Adam Driver's character, after his first meeting with them, he tells their sergeant in a debrief with Ron right there, he says, they're mostly clowns. And they're portrayed as clowns in the movie quite well. And that's kind of the way I thought about all of these neo-Nazi hate group folks marching, the Proud Boys and the Blood Tribe and whatnot. They really are kind of clowns. At least they were until they were given badges and guns and started working for the federal government. Now they're not so clownish anymore. They're pretty tragic. But anyway, in this story, at this point in history, the Klan, at least in Colorado Springs, had gone nonviolent. And I think that was also at a national level. They actually said, like MLK. So they mostly focus on like cross burnings and stuff and public protests. But there is a part of the story where the FBI reaches out to Ron when they find out what he's doing. They have a secret meeting and they start kind of sharing information, and information goes back and forth. And the FBI had history going back to the 1920s, which I'm going to read directly from the book about. But one of the things they pick up in comparing notes is that, there are two large military installations in Colorado Springs, the Army and the Air Force Academy. And there are a couple members of the military that are active KKK members at that time. Not a shock now, sadly, but that was a big insight for them at the time. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, headquartered down there, had two very senior members of NORAD that were Klan members. So the FBI agent opens up to Ron and shares this treasure trove of information on the history of the Klan in Colorado. And that's what I want to read to you now. Because looking at the history, it's so interesting to hear people, visiting comedians in particular, refer to Denver as a liberal city, which it is now. And most cities in the country do vote blue, so that's not unique to Denver. But what might be unique is the city's transition over the last literally 100 years from a KKK hotbed to a city that is recognized for being socially progressive. So here's the history right from the book. Okay. He gets this information from the FBI. He says it was a virtual time capsule on the Colorado Klan, how and when they formed, 1921, their first Grand Dragon, a physician named John Galen Locke, and their activities, such as bombing the home of a black mail carrier who had moved into a white neighborhood, burning a black African Methodist Episcopal church to the ground, boycotting Denver's Jewish businessmen and excluding them from being members of a specific club such as the Masons, and making physical threats to Jews and Catholics. By 1923, it was estimated that the Klan in Colorado had approximately 30,000 to 45,000 members, half of whom lived in Denver. For the record, the population of Denver at that time was about 270,000. So it's a pretty substantial. And if you take out women and children, it's a pretty big percentage. There were also chapters in Kansas City, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo. Once established, the Klan made a grasp for political power. They took control of the state's Republican Party and selected virtually all of its candidates in the 1924 elections. This is where it gets crazy. By 1925, the Colorado State Senate and House of Representatives were filled with a majority of Klan members elected through the Republican Party. And again, Republican at that time, that was actually kind of unusual. What immediately leapt out of the yellowed pages at me was the name Benjamin Stapleton. Longtime residents of Denver will recognize that name immediately. One of their candidates. He was elected mayor of Denver and served from 1923 to 1947. He was the major force behind a project which later became the Denver Municipal Airport. In 1944, the airport's name was changed in his honor to Stapleton International Airport. Now, by 1944, as you read this and you understand this, it was well known who he was and what he stood for, okay? Just for the record. Several key members of his mayoral staff were also Klan members. So committed was his relationship to the Klan that irate voters called for his resignation after learning of his Klan sympathies, which he withheld during the campaign in 1927. His response to the recall effort was delivered at a Klan rally. I pledged to work with the Klan and for the Klan in the coming election, heart and soul, and if I am elected, I shall give the Klan the kind of administration it wants. Stapleton won the recall election on the strength of the large Klan voter turnout and their influence on the Denver populace. Jubilant in their victory, Klan members held a cross-burning ceremony. That's how they celebrate. In the November 1924 general election, other Klan-supported candidates swept to victory. Listen to this list. The governor, Clarence J. Morley, was a Klansman. The 2 U.S. senators, Rice Means and Lawrence Phipps, had strong Klan connections, and the Klan held the offices of lieutenant governor, state auditor, and attorney general. Another Klansman, William Candlish, was selected by the Grand Dragon to be the chief of police for the Denver Police Department and was officially appointed by Mayor Stapleton. In addition, Klansmen were seated on the Board of Regents for the University of Colorado and the state Supreme Court. The city of Denver and state of Colorado, in essence, were under Klan control. So pervasive was the Klan's control and influence in Colorado that certain national publications began spelling Colorado with a K. Their political dominance lasted approximately 3 years, ending in 1926, following funding irregularities investigated by federal authorities. Anyway. He says, I wonder how many people who flew in and out of Stapleton International Airport knew that, in their own way, they were paying homage to a past leader of the Ku Klux Klan. So that is straight from the book on the history of the KKK in Colorado generally, and Denver specifically. If you're interested, cities that still vote red, I looked it up, so I'll share it. Those cities that still vote red include Colorado Springs, Provo, Utah, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa, Fort Worth, Texas, Greenville, South Carolina, Bakersfield, California, and Virginia Beach, Virginia. Now, I skipped over some of the things that were not true in the movie. You know, the bombing, the beating of Ron Stallworth at the end, the love interest. But the main things that were true that are just crazy are the fact that Ron used his real name as a police officer. And there was tension, by the way, that somebody would recognize his partner in a KKK meeting and go, that guy's a cop, you know? That part was true. The things they uncovered about KKK members in the military and in NORAD, those were all true. And I think the information sharing between Colorado Springs Police Department and the FBI probably served to prevent some violent reaction by the KKK in the city. But, you know, why is it still relevant? You know, the KKK in this country has been somewhat supplanted by these neo-Nazi white supremacist hate groups like Blood Tribe or Proud Boys. You know, they're all white supremacists, all three, just focusing their hate on minorities and Jews and, tragically, as we'll mention, the LGBTQ community. Because if you recall, it was only 4 years ago, there was a shooting in 2022 at Club Q, which was preceded by a lot of anti-gay rhetoric. And the last thing I'll add, I choked up watching it. The very end, Spike Lee adds more footage about the Charlottesville, what I call Unite the White rally, than I've ever seen in one place. And it's wow, it's emotional, man. I've always looked back, well, always in the last few years, trying to figure out what's happened to our country. Look back at that as not just a turning point, but a telling moment in history. If you didn't see what was happening going back in 2011 with the whole birther controversy led by Donald Trump, if you didn't see what was happening with the Supreme Court being taken over by, you know, a supermajority of Christo-fascist servants to the Federalist Society, 2017, the Unite the Right rally where someone was tragically killed because someone drove their car into a crowd, that was the telling moment, not a turning moment, but a telling moment. Because unlike a lot of the Proud Boys and even ICE agents who go out in public with masks or, you know, or I say ironically burqas on, that day, if you look at that film, those neo-Nazis were marching without masks. There was no shame, no embarrassment. In fact, I didn't see at the end of this movie, but there was a clip of some of them standing there defiantly being interviewed with their faces exposed. And they were marching with tiki torches, chanting, "Jews will not replace us, Jews will not replace us." And so if you watch the movie, don't get, you know, oh, it's over, the story's done. Watch the end. Watch all the clips from Charlottesville that Spike Lee added and see if you agree or disagree with my take on that moment in history. So very short episode. I've been gone for 2 months. I decided to foster a puppy, which the day I was supposed to pick up the puppy became 2 puppies, and a week later became 3 puppies. And what was supposed to be 2 weeks became 2 months. And actually an adoption of one of those puppies. If you follow my videos every morning, the former foster puppy known as Clover is now in her forever home with me, named Xena, warrior princess. So, but I'm back. Look forward to doing this on the regular. I did do all the work on another couple movies where they're just like, this one is so tough to do. One of them was MK Ultra, about the CIA's experiments with LSD. And since I talk a lot about psychedelics, there is a movie about it. The book is a little weird, but I'm going to watch the movie and see if I can't turn that into an episode. But I've got just a stack of books to get through that where movies were made about the book, and I look forward to it. So thanks for sticking with me. Talk to you soon.